My husband's cousin told him to tamper with my birth control to force an unwanted pregnancy.
Hello and welcome. Can't thank you enough for being here.
It is my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you know why you are here?
I do. I'm about to tell the story regarding the in-law from hell who doesn't seem to be able to accept that there are people that don't wish to have babies.
Sounds like it. Sounds like a piece of work. Sounds like this one.
Indeed. I envy the people that don't know him and haven't met him. In the story I'm about to relate, you'll see why.
Well, before we even start, I wrote down the story into one single take.
Okay then, my story is called My Husband's Cousin Told Him to Tamper with My Birth Control to Force an Unwanted Pregnancy.
What? What in the heavens? Oh my god. That title is horrible. I mean, it's shocking. I'm not saying you're a bad writer or anything. I'm just surprised such a title would be possible.
Hey, don't worry. You're not the first person to react accordingly.
Okay, then. This sounds like some juicy gossip filled with drama and clashes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Alright, so where was I? Oh yeah. My husband's cousin told him to tamper with my birth control to force an unwanted pregnancy. Hi. This will be a rant. I'm feeling weirded out by what my husband told me last night. So he knows I don't want kids, and that the chances of me changing my mind are next to nil. He's always been okay with it, and even said he's happy with just me in his life. But, despite our best efforts to tell his family and relatives to bug off about when we're going to give them the good news, they insist on telling him to force me to have a baby. Facepalm. So he was talking to his cousin over the phone, and he told me that his cousin even went so far as to suggest him to tamper with my birth control to get me pregnant against my will. I promptly educated my husband that his cousin is sick in the head if he thinks that it's okay for a man to do this to his wife, and that would be a crime on par with rape and sexual assault called reproductive coercion. He didn't know about it, if the couple was married or if it was even a thing. Thanks, poor education system. I'm rolling my eyes. He asked what I was thinking about, so I promptly explained to him that marital rape is a form of domestic violence and is also illegal and a crime in this country. I don't know about the laws in some country in India, but here in the US, that crap wouldn't fly here. Then I asked him if his cousin would do that to his wife and force her to have a kid, and he said no. And then I replied, so why the hell would he think that this was okay for you to do to me? I was basically swearing at this point. Then he asked what reproductive coercion was, and I asked, if birth control falls unintentionally, how could you prove it was done on purpose? To which I replied, yes. While birth control can fail if the other partner tries to prevent their spouse from accessing abortion and forces them to keep it, that's also a form of violence and it's not okay. And unfortunately, it's one of the most common forms of spouse abuse statistically. Also, sorry, I just needed to vent because I'm so sick and tired of his relatives pressuring us to have kids constantly and telling him that he's wasting his life with me if I don't give him a baby or adopt a kid to fulfill this imaginary void they keep saying we'll regret feeling when we're older. We don't need to have kids to be happy. On the contrary, I've never been happier than when I learned I didn't need to have them, and how freeing that felt. And until I change my mind and suddenly feel some magical urge to become a parent, I'm sticking to my guns and saying no. To the point, I'd like to point out that my husband isn't asking for kids because he wants them for himself or because he feels the desire to be a parent. He's just getting pressure from his friends and family to have them because of their cultural norms and making him feel guilty for not following the status quo. They tell him his life has no meaning without kids, or who will take care of you when you're older? Total BS, total bullshit. To me, those are probably the worst reasons to have a kid, if the kid isn't wanted to begin with. It's super messed up in my opinion because the kid never asked to be born. I gave him several examples from my own family of how damaging it is to the kid being born to unwilling parents when they are unwanted, and the postpartum depression that comes with it is incredibly damaging. This is why I believe if you are not 100% sure you want to be a parent, then don't do it. I also asked my husband if he would accept the possibility of having a child with a disability, since autism and other learning disabilities run in my family and the chances of my having an autistic child are likely 50-50 or more. He said that nope, he wouldn't want it. So I said, if you aren't okay with the possibility of having a child with special needs and love them as they are unconditionally, then you're not ready to have a kid or don't want them for the right reasons. I should mention he never brings up having kids unless he talks to his relatives and friends who are putting this pressure on him. Without their input, we are perfectly happy with each other, and he's never touched me or put pressure on me to have kids or voice any desire of his own to have them. In fact, he supported my wish to get an IUD, and we didn't tell his family about it. However, he has said, if I were to change my mind, he'd try his best to be a good parent to the best of his ability, but would only ever agree to one kid. Something his family told him I would want eventually, and again, there's that pressure from them to be a parent.
Wow, now that's quite a story. I personally love my children. I am blessed to be a father with the one I love. However, God punish me if I were to push others to think the same way I do regarding reproductive rights and all other stuff. Oh, speaking of which, some people on the live chat have expressed concern and worry for your well-being and your safety. Would you mind replying to these comments, please?
Since there seems to be a lot of concern for my safety based on a small thing, let me clarify some things. I'd like to point out that my husband and I were talking about how bad it was that his cousin suggested removing condoms without my knowledge, and we were both extremely appalled by that. His cousin doesn't know we got my IUD and won't take no from either of us. Our discussion was about a hypothetical scenario, and he was playing devil's advocate, asking how it could be discovered and persecuted as a crime, as I explained to him what the word reproductive coercion meant, and gave him an example of how it happens. English is not my husband's first language. I asked his opinion later if he agreed with his cousin, and he said, "No, of course not." Also, the fact that he brought it to me in the first place because he couldn't believe his idiot cousin would say such things speaks for itself. My husband is also tocophobic and can't bear the thought of me going through a pregnancy even if I wanted to. Despite having an IUD, he does not trust it 100%, so he takes extra precautions to avoid any accidents. He doesn't want kids either, and earlier said that he would try to be supportive if I did. But As he gets older, he has said that he wouldn't want to be a father in his 40s. Back then, we were both fence-sitters. We continue talking about the future, and here in the US, people are free to choose different lifestyles and how having kids is optional, and that his relatives' arguments on needing kids fall flat on their face. He's tried to argue with them countless times that we are not having kids, but they won't listen. He then brought up how he learned women can tear open during childbirth and couldn't understand how so many women could go through it multiple times. Then I told him about the husband snitch and how barbaric that practice was. And he was like, "Oh my god, no, don't tell me!" Lol.
Once again, such a pleasant person. Nah, not really, cause I'm being sarcastic and ironic. Any other details you'd like to add?
Another piece of extra information is that I'd like to clarify that I'm not in danger. My husband and I talked about it again for more clarity, and I added that to the post for more context. And yes, the cousin-in-law who said those things has a history of making his wife abort the last few of their pregnancies because he wanted a male child, which is actually illegal in India, called female feticide, if you want to look that up.
I have a little one at home. The thought of female feticide makes me sick to my stomach. I can't believe some people would be like that to girls. Also, I know I probably should have started with this in the beginning, but I would like to ask where you are from.
Additionally, I'm from Missouri. I actually grew up in a polyamorous Fundy Mormon family as the oldest of 14 kids. My dad has 3 wives now, so I got away from that mess, moved in with my aunt before going to India, where I met my now husband, and we met online. It's a long story, lol, but I'm happy life is more normal now.
So you live in India, but you are from the US originally. This is indeed an amazing crossover. Tell me, what was India like?
I moved to India for 4 years, but I'm back in the US now. I would describe it as an organized chaos. It's loud, busy, and hot. And the food is really good, but spicy.
There is some sort of rumors and harsh words being spoken about some unhygienic food. Describe more, please.
It is also really cheap. I got all my dental work done, including a root canal, and after the 6 rays and the crown, it ended up only costing around $42. 42 American dollars. It depends on where you get the food from. A good restaurant or home-cooked food is usually clean, but you have to be careful about certain street vendors as they aren't always hygienic because they are unregulated. I had a veg burger with fly maggots in the chutney once. Yuck. Also, everywhere there's farmers selling fresh produce and fruits from wooden hand carts along every street during the evening. The mangoes are amazing. It's like an open farmers market all the time, even along the main highways. I also like how there's small shops everywhere that are family-owned small businesses. And of course, cows and dogs roam the streets freely, and the city is full of temples everywhere.
Tell me more, please. Tell us more about you and tell your story. Let's talk about other things apart from the in-law from hell. I've heard that since cows are sacred animals to Hinduism, they basically roam around completely free and without any regulation. I've also read that there's an ongoing problem with feral dogs, in which they don't control, neuter, or vaccinate street and stray dogs. So rabies, viruses, and other diseases spread like the plague. In consequence, this causes some people to become infected with rabies, the most noticeable symptom being a crippling fear of water. Did you see any of that?
Oh yes, there are street dogs everywhere. Depending on what neighborhoods the dogs live in, sometimes people put food out and get them neutered or spayed or vaccinated. We had a couple street dogs that were like the neighborhood pets. There was a reported case of rabies while I was there that killed a child, but the dog that bit him was a German Shepherd and someone's pet, not a street dog. Cows wander around and people feed them. Some people also keep dairy cows and turn the bottom floor of their house into a barn, and they sell the milk locally. We bought our milk from them and it's boiled on the stove to pasteurize it.
With all that context provided, let's go back to your child-free story.
Of course, yeah, sure. So my husband and I applied for his visa so we could go back to the US, so we could move back to the US. He keeps in touch with his family and friends back in India. We've told them countless times we weren't planning on having kids and that I didn't want any. My husband has been fine either way, whatever I decided. He's never had strong feelings for the idea of raising a family either. And he's always said that he doesn't want me to decide I wanted a kid later because of our age gap, saying that he doesn't want to start later in life. He's 37 now and I'm 28. And he'd only agreed to one if I really wanted kids. As I mentioned back when we first met, we were both on the fence, hence his agreement to let me have a kid if I really wanted it. I have since decided I didn't want them, but was just conditioned to think I had to have kids someday. Ever since he's been happy with the final decision to not have any at all. But his family still thinks we need to have and expect us to eventually give them the good news, despite him reminding them we aren't planning on having any. So a few days ago he was calling his friends and family to show them our new apartment here in the US and how good life is here. Again, they started asking about when we'll buy a house and start having kids. One friend of his has no clue how female anatomy works, suggested I go through IVF, saying maybe she's worried about ruining her figure, which is hilarious and stupid because that's not how that works. Lol. IVF, by the way, means in vitro fertilization. His mom stopped bugging me about it a long while ago while I was living with them in India. She's really sweet but doesn't speak English, besides telling me I'm a good girl for helping her in the kitchen. She already has grandkids that she helps take care of. And I don't think she's ever asked my husband about us having kids, though his aunts and uncles have. Now his uncles and aunts and cousins and some of his friends are the ones who have decided there must be something wrong with me for why we haven't started our family yet. We've gotten every baby bingo other book from them, particularly the Who Will Take Care of You When You're Old one, which in their culture the sons stay home to provide for their elderly parents and is why they prefer sons over daughters. To them, this is the only way of life from cradle to grave. In their culture, once you get married, usually an arranged marriage, you have to start having kids right away. Indians have very strong family culture, and some can't imagine any other lifestyle. Like his cousin who told us both I should be forced to have a kid. I'm rolling my eyes when I say that. Back in India, occasionally we have parties with his cousins and this cousin would start demanding, "You have to have kids. When will you have kids?" Keep in mind his English is limited. He would start a huge argument with me over it, and I would get upset trying to defend my reasons for not wanting any. At some point his wife would tell him jokingly, "They're saving the planet from overpopulation," to get him to stop. Or my husband would joke, "Our birds are our kids, lol." But when his cousin was talking in Hindi with the rest of the family, he knows I don't speak Hindi, so I asked the other cousin what they were talking about, and he said they were saying how I should be forced to have a kid. I was confused and very uncomfortable and trying to laugh it off, hoping it was a translation error, and we left soon after that. So recently, after my husband got off the phone with him, he came to me saying how all they ask him for is for us to give them some good news. And that dumb thing his friend said about the in vitro fertilization thing that made no sense, then told me that that cousin had told him that he should remove condoms without my knowledge in order to impregnate me. His cousin doesn't know that we got my intrauterine device because we kept that secret from him. My husband was not okay with that at all. When he told me that, he was a little upset and I was completely mortified. Then we talk about how shitty that was to even think that was remotely okay to tell him to do that, and how it is related to marital rape, assault, and it's called reproductive coercion. He didn't understand what the words marital rape or reproductive coercion meant in English, so I gave some examples of what it means. He knew it was wrong, but when learning new English words, he likes me to explain their meaning to him, and he had questions about how the law works for catching someone and what they might say or do to hypothetically try to hide it. He was also curious what marital rape was because he had never heard of it or thought it was a real thing, because in India they don't believe rape is possible after marriage. I also explained that it can happen in abusive marriages as a form of violence against a spouse, and he was mortified. He had simply never been told about these things and was curious to learn and talk about them with me. We discussed our opinions on reproductive choice and consent, and how tampering with birth control when the agreement to use protection is removed secretly is a violation of trust. It harms the other person and it can ruin the relationship, etc. He fully agreed with that statement. It was a good discussion even though it was upsetting.
It is upsetting to me right now. That was incredible. You've given me a lot to think about. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure. You're welcome. Thanks again for having me. Feels good to share this story. Thank you, X21, and the kind audience who accompanied us today.